Isn't Easter sweet? Say amen. Amen. If you're a follower of Jesus, if you belong to the kingdom, if you know that the blood has covered you and that there is life for you through this Christ who is risen after this living, say amen. Amen. If you are joyful to be in God's house today because it's Easter morning and there's no better place to be for a Christian, say amen. Amen. So we're going to go to the scripture this morning and we're going to settle in something that God gives us that is rich for our hearts and souls, that blesses us in ways that only God can bless us. It gives us things as we leave this place today and go back to our regular lives that fill us up in a way that is rejoicing for us and conforming for us and giving us assurances as people. This morning he takes us to a rather unusual place, one that maybe some of us haven't visited before. If you are in the church today and you're not a believer, you're not a follower of Christ, this is a morning for you to listen to the evidence that's given of what this great story is and how wonderfully true it is. If you're a believer, this is familiar to you. You're older, you're toward the sunset of your life, you spend a lot of Easters in a church somewhere. Then with this old pastor, rejoice. We're in a good place because this is where God has chosen for us. If you're in between in life, you're still raising children, you're still trying to figure it out. The mortgage is still big, there's still car payments. Well, know this to be true. There is eternal truth here for you and for me that transcends, listen, that transcends all the ordinary of our lives in wonderful ways. It was just this thing in the middle of the story. As we listened to it this morning in the gospel, I hope you were listening, it was really just this inanimate thing in the middle of the story. The stone that sealed the tomb of Jesus of Nazareth. And yet we learn from the gospel for our lives that that stone, that simple, round, great big stone, played a great big role, a significant role. You see, for those who loved Jesus, these women who came to anoint him, and others too, for those who loved Jesus of Nazareth before the crucifixion and had watched him or stood in the back while he died on the cross, for those who loved him, that stone, it stood in the way for them. It stood in the way of their joy of being with him. No longer could they reach out and touch him or have the intimacy of this relationship, to simply stand or sit and talk with him, to eat with him and laugh with him and probably cry with him. That stone, think with me this morning, that stone stood in the way. It stood in the way of the hope they had been filled up with too. As they listened and watched and followed this Jesus, most of them, these women certainly, had come to believe in their heart of hearts that this Jesus wasn't just anybody. He was somebody. So when he died on the cross, when they took his life away and they took his cold body off the cross and laid it in his grave and rolled the stone over it, all the hope that they had had for this Jesus of Nazareth, it was buried behind that stone. It stood in the way. That stone, loved ones, had stood in the way. And those women couldn't move it. On this Easter morning, I want you to hear that death for you and for me, like it was for them, death for you and for me, it's like that stone. It stands in the way of what we all, every one of us here this morning, so much want. You know, our view of it, this thing called death, that it's like this great big gravestone, our view of it is only from this side. And so from this side, well, what do we see? We see people that we've loved that have been part of our lives for a short time or a long time, moms or dads or grandmas or grandpas, sometimes brothers or sisters, God forbid even children. We see them leave and go to the other side of the stone. And so our view is left with, listen to me this morning, our view is left with caskets and mausoleums and tombstones and piles of dirt and fading flowers. All we can see, loved ones, all we can see in our humanity is from this side of the stone. It's a sum total of our view. And you know, so you hear it clearly this morning, you know as well as I do, we can't move it out of the way, and we can't get around it. As far as our technology and our science and our wisdom as human beings have come, as much as we have fixed and healed and made better and changed, we still know this to be true. The big one, the big kahuna in the room, we can't do anything about. Death is that stone that stands out there, and I'll say it to you again so you hear it loud and clear. We can't, us human beings, we can't move it, and we can't get around it by our ourselves, and so we are left in this place, almost invariably, we are left in this place as human beings where we are left with nothing but grieving, feeling helpless and hopeless, sometimes afraid. Because it is, and you know this, it is so cotton-picking final. Every one of us here this morning in this church who have, in the course of our living experience, what most human beings at some point will experience. Someone that we love has left this life. They have gone away. They're on the other side of the stone. Then you know, I know. When we come to that place in our lives as human beings, the stone, which is death itself for us, it really, oh my God, it stands in the way. And it feels so final. I know that we gather on Easter mornings especially, but on Sunday mornings as Christians, and we hold up this idea in our lives and this hope in our lives that there is something more. I know that in our society, in our culture, you know this to be true too, we try to skirt the issue by calling them, well, listen to it, we call them celebrations of life. And yet if you've ever been to one, especially one where we were celebrating the life of someone you love, you know this, it hardly feels like a celebration, and it sure doesn't look like life. So for you and I, we can come to a place where we feel helpless and hopeless and a lot of times afraid. But listen, the one on the other side of the stone, the one they laid in the grave, he came back to life. This Jesus who died on the cross on Good Friday, in the tomb, all of a sudden his heart started to beat again. He started to breathe. His eyes came open. His hands moved. He reached up and took the claws off of his face and his body. He stood up and listen to this. He rolled back the stone. He didn't do it so that he could get out. Jesus rolled back the stone so that you and I could see in. He wanted us to see with our hearts and our lives, with our minds, with the very essence of who we are. He wanted us to see that his tomb is empty. It's hollow. The angel who met the women said, he's not here. He has risen. And for you and I on Easter morning, as this one stood up and shed the burial cloths and became this risen Savior, he reached out with the power of his word, listen, and he rolled back the stone. And I'll repeat for you, not so he could get out. He rolled it back so that you and I could see in. And see that the grave, the tomb, was empty. His is empty. And listen, and he is the first fruits. Just the start of this. Loved ones, he rolled back the stone on Easter morning to show you and I that death no longer has power. Not for his people it doesn't. So for us this morning, this is the good news. Listen to it. It is so grand. Because Jesus rolled back the stone, as Christians, what we believe is what we will get. We believe that there is a life beyond this one. Beyond the tombstones and the fading flowers and the piles of dirt and the urns of ashes and the final goodbyes. Listen, we believe as Christians, because Jesus is alive, we believe there is a life beyond this one. And it is full and rich. It is filled with contentment and joy and alleluias. It has as its center this Christ who is risen again, and all the people around him that he has gathered by his blood, with his heart and his will. We believe as Christians, we believe there's a life beyond this one. It is grand and glorious, filled with joy and peace, and listen to me this morning, and it's never going to come to an end. We believe, Christians, hear me, we believe that it is a crowded place filled with loved ones. Ones we will know. So when glory dawns for you and for me, imagine this, we will not only have heard of Moses, we will know Moses. Hello. And Abraham and Isaac and Jacob and Matthew and Mark and Peter and John and Paul and all the saints who have gone before us. Listen, and every person in your life and mine who left this life with faith in Jesus, the risen Lord, they will be there too, also very much alive. If you're in this church on Sunday morning, not just any Sunday morning, this Easter morning, and there is someone in your life, there is a grandma or a grandpa, there is a mom or a dad, there is a brother or a sister, there is a child, there is someone you have loved who has left this life, who has gone beyond the stone, and you have felt and lived with and tried to work through the reality that they're gone and it seems so final. Christian, I want you to hear this today. We believe there is a life beyond this one, and we believe that people that we love who have left this life with faith in Jesus, they're on the other side of the stone and they're alive. They're more alive than we are here, filled with joy and peace and contentment, just absolutely rejoicing before the Savior. Let me add one more for you. Listen, we believe that life is just waiting for us. Those of us who are resurrection Christians, you know this. We've just begun. Wherever we are in life, whatever our state is or our status is or our place is, however old we are in terms of how the world measures age, you hear me this morning? We're resurrection Christians. We've just begun. Someday by God's grace, listen, someday by God's grace, my breath is going to stop. My heart's going to wear out. My lungs will shut down. My body will quit. My soul will leave. Now listen to me, Christians. My soul will leave, and I will be in that moment in the presence of the Jesus who gave his life for me. And that life in front of him will be absolutely perfect. Today, if you're listening to my voice, and Jesus is your Savior, then you know this. I want you to know this. The same is true for you. That life, we believe, is just waiting for us. You know, death was this stone that stood in our way. That is until Jesus came back to life. And he rolled it out of the way for us. He took away its power. So someday by his grace, we are going to be carried right past it into a life that will never end. Oh, the joy it gives. Oh, the peace it brings. That's why we say, Christians, hallelujah, Christ is risen.
He is risen indeed. Hallelujah.
Hallelujah, Christ is risen.
He is risen indeed. Hallelujah.
Oh, the joy. If you would rise, please.